The new ProArt line from ASUS is a content creator's dream, and this PC case is no exception, especially if you're not a fan of RGB, which I know there are a few of you out there. This is the ProArt PA602, and to say that this case already has some big fans would be an understatement. From its intentionally subtle branding to the stealthy design, there is a lot to love about this PC case. And we're gonna check it out right here, right now, on Robeytech. We build a lot of systems around here at Robeytech, and ASUS components have been a staple since we started building PCs. And to be clear, they make a lot of PC parts. And when it comes to style, ASUS pretty much has a brand for everyone. ROG for the overclockers, epic gamers, and RGB enthusiasts. Tough gaming for ruggedly built kit with military-style designs for casual gamers. Prime for the all-around user who loves a clean aesthetic. And finally, ProArt, a brand emphasizing minimalistic design to strip away distractions for those who create. We've been watching each of these brands grow, but it's cool to watch the ProArt line become a more full-fledged brand with monitors, motherboards, graphics cards, chassis, coolers, and also laptops. I guess that's a full-fledged brand at that point in time. We just finished building a $2,600 ProArt Creator PC, which you can watch right after this video or just pop over right here, and it all took place inside of the ProArt PA602. Let's take a look at it in more detail. As far as dimensions go, the PA602 is about 9.62 inches or 245 millimeters wide, 23.35 inches or 593 millimeters tall, and about 22 inches or 560 millimeters deep. In other words, this is a pretty big case, and it's hefty too. In fact, I was listening to Brian carry it up the stairs and he sounded like a power lifter. It's 35 pounds or 15.8 kilograms hefty. For context, that's about the same weight as a toddler's bike or a fully grown beagle, though more cumbersome to carry and not as fun to pet. That's the beagle, not the bike. For case I/O and controls, this has two USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports, two USB 2 ports, one USB Type-C port, as well as power and reset buttons with a nifty lock for the power button so no one accidentally shuts off your PC during the middle of a massive rendering project. Brian, have you ever had that happen? Like your toe just, oh really? Okay, so the lock would actually be helpful, huh? Yep. Oh, he's smiling, look at that. Not only that, there is a switch here for fan speed and control. This is actually a really neat feature if you need an extra burst of cooling during a rendering session without having to play around with any software whatsoever. Now the PA602 has a toolless design, which we'll cover a bit later. It's a giant open grill with a dust filter that tells you when it needs to be cleaned. It's wild. It's got like an IR sensor on it that detects dust and yells at you. Like, hey dude, I'm kind of filthy over here. Want to do something like that? It's not my voice though. It's actually no, it's just an LED. But the point is it says, hey, I need to be clean. Now this case comes in one color, and you know what, that's kind of okay. It's stealthy black and it retails for $269.99. And did I mention that it has wheels? But the ProArt PA602 supports micro ATX, mini ITX, mini DTX, DTX, and ATX motherboards, as well as eATX motherboards under 277 millimeters or 10.9 inches wide. You know what, honestly, that's a lot of X's. I just went through those X's super fast. As for GPUs, the PA602 supports GPUs up to 450 millimeters or 17.7 inches in length. If you're sticking with the ASUS line of ProArt GPUs, this is great news because with that clearance, the PA602 can fit the ProArt GeForce RTX 4080 OC with no trouble whatsoever. And the fact is, you can stack them, so it can do two if you use the matching Z790 motherboard. As for fan support, this case has some big ones. Big fans, that is. Now in the front of the PA602, there are two 200 millimeter fans. They don't have RGB, which is kind of the point of ProArt, but you can replace them with ones that do. But dang, I just cannot get over how huge they are. At the top, the PA602 can support either three 120 millimeter or 140 millimeter fans, and either 120 or 140 millimeter fans in the back, which I'm super happy when you can do 420 at the top and 140 in the back. Much like the front of the case, the PA602 comes with a 140 millimeter fan pre-installed in the back of the case, which you're gonna see some coolness a little later on to see how that works. As for CPU coolers, ASUS gave us 190 millimeters of clearance for air coolers, which we're pretty sure would be supported with enough airflow, but you know what, we'll be doing that in a video later with, another time. However, if you consider the fractal torrent and the fact that we did an air-cooled 13900K build, well, that should tell you something. If you were looking to mount an AIO in the PA602, you are limited to mounting the radiator at the top of the case, but we wouldn't call the capacity to mount a 420mm radiator very limiting. As for PSU support, ASUS does go a little meager on the length of the ATX PSUs it can accommodate. The PA602 can only handle PSUs up to 190mm in length. To be fair, PSUs like the ASUS Tough Gaming 1000 watt Gold PSU will fit just fine, but the ASUS PSU named after the God of Thunder might have a tighter fit in there if you keep the hard drive mounts. Now, if you take the hard drive mounts out and all that sort of stuff, it becomes a different story. This case, speaking of hard drives, can support 4 2.5-inch drives, and there are 4 combo bays that can support up to 4 3.5-inch or 2.5-inch drives. This is great if you need cold storage and access to massive files. In the creator world, they still use 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch drives. So yeah, it's still a thing. We're gonna do something here that I have been itching to do for a while. We're gonna use the Smoke Genie for visualizations so you can see intake via those dual 200mm fans, with the top fan feeding the ProArt LC420 and the bottom fan feeding that ProArt 4060 Ti that we did in our showcase build. For exhaust, we have the 140mm fan in the rear as well as the 420mm AIO at the top, and they are actually getting a little bit of special help from this very special exhaust port, which you can't see here because we took the tempered glass off, that helps alleviate the positive pressure situation we have inside of this case. This positive pressure situation though is great for dust control and also keeping the heat not trapped inside of the case. Now, if you do want to do more than just get hot air, then go ahead and slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring the notification bell so you can get notifications each and every time we post content like this, which is not full of hot air, right here on Robeytech. Okay, let's talk about thermals, which is very exciting for me because they have those massive tracts of land, those 200mm fans in the front. Now, if you watch the live stream, which you should check out, we tested a bunch of different power settings, including things like multi-core enhancement, ASUS AI overclocking, as well as we just tested it with basically the stock Intel settings. Not only that, we tested the ProArt LC420mm AIO, which is absolutely bonkers, and we're gonna have a review on later on in the new year. But for this video though, we configured things with the same parts we usually test with, and all the details for that are down in the description below and on the graphs if you want more information. While idling, the PA602 averaged 28 degrees Celsius on the CPU and 31 degrees Celsius on the GPU. Those numbers position the ProArt near the Lian Li Evo RGB and NZXT's H6 Flow. Not a bad pair to be hanging out with, by the way. Under full CPU load, the PA602, which surprised me, was a bit on the warmer side of the playground, with the CPU temps at 75 degrees and the GPU temps at 28. Comparatively, that puts the PA602 close company with the NZXT H9 Flow. These two cases have nearly identical scores, so much so that everyone else on the playground kept calling them by each other's names. Like, hey, H9 Flow, oh, I'm sorry, I meant PA602. As for our 1440p gaming benchmarks, the ProArt PA602 showed that this workstation could still hang in the top 3 for our leaderboards when gaming. With CPU temps at 45 degrees Celsius and GPU thermal performance averaging 58 degrees Celsius, the PA602's CPU temps were 1 degree greater than the NZXT H6 Flow. GPU temps were 1 degree Celsius lower. Let's take a few minutes and talk about the build experience inside of the PA602, as well as some things that are worth pointing out. Listen, I'm gonna tell you up front, there is a lot that we love about this case and a lot that leaves us feeling like this case still needs a bit more time in the oven to bake. This is definitely a V1, but it is a dang good V1. When it comes to case prep, the PA602 is like one of those dreams that is most good but takes some weird turns. Like, you're on a groove, but you're also dancing on bacon. It's pretty simple to get inside the PA602. It has buttons on the back for popping off both the side and top panels, and then once you're inside, the front cover has these 2 latches up at the front that let you flip it open, and voila. Now, there were a few places that had a couple screws holding things in place, but they were like hidden behind like magnetic plates, which is like, what the heck, ASUS? I'm building a PC, not playing Where's Waldo, and we're specifically talking about the AIO. Since we're talking about disassembly, I do have to point out the front cover here. I know we mentioned the dust filter, which is super cool, but you know what? I'm just gonna show it. It's branded. Look, you can see the ProArt written inside of it. It's cool, but it's super subtle. And we also have to point out the vents in the glass side panel again. We loved seeing this, especially if you're gonna go vertically mount your GPU. It's a very thoughtful design, and you got to see with the smoke earlier how it affects ventilation, even if you just normally mount your GPU. What is also thoughtful is the presence of a built-in GPU sag bracket. And it's also, you know what, honestly, it looks really good. This thing is really well reinforced, and if you're gonna slap in that ASUS ProArt RTX 4080 overclock GPU in here, the PA602 can help it from dropping like it's hot, or dropping like it's not hot, because you don't want a hot GPU. When we pop into the back of the case, we found some really nice tie downs for cable management, as well as that powered fan hub located near the top of the case. We do wish the SATA power cable was just a touch longer, because it doesn't really reach close enough to the drive bays to daisy chain very well. And the other thing too is, make sure you look for it. We actually got the whole build done and turned it on and realized we hadn't even plugged it in because it was hidden behind one of those cable ties in the back. Now, I'm gonna sound salty here for a moment, but I promise I'm not trying to go ham here for the sake of reaction or likes. We just ran into a few issues that left us wondering if ASUS designed their ProArt line to work, or if these parts were created in isolation from one another. In our showcase build, we used ProArt parts, GPU, motherboard, and AIO. And a couple of the parts struggled to fit in the case well. Let's start with the AIO and the top mounting bracket. Using the ProArt LC420mm AIO, we struggled to hide our fan cables. Remember, this is part of the PA602 bread and butter. Big fans, bigger AIOs, maximum cooling. But when it came to running the fan cables, they didn't give us any place to actually run them. So if you just kind of had them hanging down there haphazardly, they were showing in the front of the case from inside the case. Now, we were using the ASUS ProArt 420mm AIO, so there just wasn't a whole lot of wriggle room. However, with enough tenacity and a little bit of bacon grease from that dream earlier, we managed to find a pathway to run our cables through the front to the mess of wires near the front of the case. Once we did figure out how to get everything installed properly and cable management, there was a little metal piece from the bracket that didn't go back into the case very well, and that was in the back. And we're talking about it was hidden. It's just kind of it's kind of weird. We no matter how we oriented it, we couldn't actually get it back with the 420mm AIO. The other thing I also wanted to mention is there's a place in the back of the case where there's like a little cover that you had to kind of run the cables through, but it was just big enough for the cables that already came through the case. And because of the lip in the front, it made it really difficult to actually close. In addition, it took me almost 5 minutes to get my cases stuff if you check it out right there from the live stream. Speaking of frustration, the last little bit is the USB 3 header was super challenging to route in a way that worked with the ProArt Z790 motherboard, because there was actually a metal support bracket for the entire case that was in the way. We ended up wrangling it in place, but you have to be really careful to keep it from like unlocking out. Now, this is going to be very motherboard specific, and this is only an issue if you have a motherboard that does side mounting for the USB 3 header, which in our case was the ProArt Z790 board that I mentioned, which is odd because you think that'd be the one that would fit the best given they're both ProArt pieces. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is the PA602 has a 3-slot latching mechanism that offers another securing point for your GPU. But the weird part about this is that those slots don't line up with most motherboards, including the ProArt Z790 motherboard. You get access to 2 slots at best before having to move down the PCIe covers. This wasn't as big of a deal since we were using a 2-slot ProArt 4060 Ti, but if you wanted to build with like a 3-slot GPU like any of the RTX 4090s, it would be an odd fit, if it fit at all. Like we said earlier, it just feels like one of those parts that were designed in a vacuum, and we're kind of bummed in terms of how it works. Listen, we don't want to dissuade you from considering this case, but we also want to make sure you're aware of the quirks and potential gotchas should you decide to plan a build inside of it. Now, if you happen to see our short on the PA602 before watching this video, we really do mean what we said in that this case has so many amazing features that it offers for workstation builds and gamers who don't like RGB. If that's you and you're building a workstation PC for content creation or for heavy computational loads, this case really is a compelling one to consider. Or if you just don't like RGB. I know I hate saying that, but it like hurts my soul a little, Brian. I know that it may sound like we're being hard on this case, but we actually know what ASUS is capable of, and we've seen the iterations. One great example is the iterations of the Hyperion. So the V1 is great, but we know what V2 will be, and we know what they're capable of achieving. This case just out of the gate just fell a bit shy of what we know that they're capable of doing. Now, as we wrap this up, these are our impressions of the ASUS ProArt PA602, but you know what? We want to know what you think. What would you build in this RGB-less PC case? Do the pro features outweigh the cons and the quirks? And let us know all of that down in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, go ahead and slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring that notification bell so you get a notification each and every time we post a video like this right here on Robeytech. Also, if you have questions or you want to discuss this case further, join us over at discord.gg/Robeytech, where you know what, you can talk to lots of tech-minded folks and maybe make a friend. Thanks so much for watching this video. Follow me at Robeytech absolutely everywhere, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.